Fellow Americans, on September 11, 2001, I was in the state of Minneapolis. I had just given one of the biggest speeches in my life. And I began by saying, response to what? And I said, to what the people gathered in this land of the free and the brave have done to me. And I can imagine, not knowing that, I was being prophetic in my statements when I talk about a response. Because in just a couple of 24-hour segments, the United States was attacked. One of the biggest terrorist attacks that have ever happened in homeland in the history of the United States. Terrorists took over commercial planes, turned them into bombs, and flew them into the World Trade Center. Others were going towards Pennsylvania and down to the northeast area of Washington, D.C., Maryland area. But they were fought by passengers who boldly took a vote and decided to bring down the plane in Pennsylvania instead of it going to hit the White House. Yes, it was a response that the world never expected from the leadership of President George Bush, who may have been considered weak by his opponents until that moment, when America gathered and rallied around the American flag and working with the first responders and frontline workers in New York, in Washington, D.C., around the Pentagon, in Pennsylvania, and other places. America came together. Americans decided to join forces in order to fight back. And the Congress of the United States voted for a war against the terrorists who used the lands of the nation of Afghanistan, this group called Al-Qaeda and their affiliates and others, to attack the United States of America. I remember a few days after this speech I gave, having come out of Little Canada into St. Paul and to other places, and then we came to where this speech was given. That was one of the most significant speeches I've given in my life. But I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what was waiting for me in the United States. But of course it happened. September 11 happened. There was fear. And even after the nation was assured that the air was safe and that the planes had begun flying, people were not flying. But that wasn't going to stop me. Because immediately that happened, I was like, hey, terrorists, I'm going to go into the air. You are not going to frighten or terrorize me. And so there I was in the planes. I remember flying immediately after that to Chicago. And then from Chicago, I also flew to Washington Dulles International, or Dallas Airport. Down to Maryland I went. Just to tell you that in the midst of the fear and everything, I told myself that I wasn't going to be a victim of other people's machinations and plans. Speakers have spoken and continue to speak about what September 11 meant. September 11 has changed the world drastically. There are dictators who have taken advantage of September 11 around the world in the name of fighting terrorists to terrorize their own people, their nationals and their country. Life presidents in African countries and other places have used buffoons and idiotic minions to kill. Some of them have been in government for 60 years, 40 as president or so, and they intend to continue if they don't die, or their children should take over. And what they do is they use state-sponsored terrorism in a very subtle form to hold their people and to kill those who are ready to oppose them. So, terrorism has been exploited, not only in the United States, as some of the leaders are saying. Because when leaders come up and tell you about the America they knew, immediately after September 9/11 terrorist attack in America, and the America they know today, they said these are two different Americas. Some of them believe that when America was threatened, America was attacked. Like we have America being attacked today by a common enemy, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that Americans came together. But they are surprised that while America is being buffeted by forces from outside and inside, people are talking about their little pet projects. They're talking about how Liz Cheney will be defeated, how we are going to do this. Democrats are scheming and planning and all of that. The independents, the Green, the other parties that make up the multi-party politics of the USA, they are talking about these issues, and some of them are pointing their fingers at the two dominant parties in the USA, the Republicans and the Democrats. There are many who say that the blame or the problem is not only on the Republicans or only on the Democrats, that the problem is a problem now for everybody. The United States is so divided, is so polarized, and nations and people are already taking advantage of this extreme and tremendous polarization inside the country. Like maybe some of them say that the United States does overseas in other countries, creating polarization or maybe division in order to exploit and destroy the country. Well, if people think that they are going to destroy the United States based on that, they lie. Because this country has a way of coming together or healing itself after it has taken stock of its weaknesses and troubles, trials and tribulations. My dear friends, it is time for people not to forget, but remember September 11 in a very positive way, so that they can harness the energies of September 11 towards nation building in a better way, in an upward movement. The country is so polarized that if you even talk about giving a little child diapers, the opposition party will tell you that no, before they even think about who they are talking no of. That's the same with COVID-19. The families of the victims are out there doing a great job. The leadership of the United States is working very hard. But September 11 did not affect only the United States of America. September 11 affected the nations of the United Nations. The United Nations was one. The Security Council was in agreement. NATO was in agreement. The African countries or countries which were actually representing the African Union and South America and Asian nations were all in agreement that these terrorists hiding in Afghanistan should be actually gotten out. So America went with the backing of the world. But what happened? Many believe that Al-Qaeda was disseminated or destroyed, or its power destroyed. Barack Obama and others took away Bin Laden, who was hiding in Pakistan, and that it was time for this war that was against Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, not against the nation of Afghanistan. It wasn't the nation of Afghanistan that did that. Even if the Taliban were in government, it's the same thing we see in other places, where certain people, evil people, take the government of the state and then try to make the government equivalent to the state and do stupid things under that, because they have the minions and buffoons who don't understand the principles and praxis of statecraft. The principles and fundamental foundations of American government and democracy is known. The founding fathers were clear, and those who have come after them have amended the constitution to make it better so that everybody can participate. And when a nation is united, when a nation is together, great things, quality things are done. This is the time for people of goodwill to come together. This is the time for the people who love freedom, bravery, and peace to come together. This is not the time for constant fighting and antagonism of others. This is not the time for that. For those whose lives were lost, those who sacrificed, the frontline workers, the firefighters, those who were out there, know that their life and their blood was not in vain. And don't try to make it little. While we look at the events that happened in September 11 and what it means to the world, we are saying that the impact and the effect was not on America alone. The free world, the people who love freedom, the people who love democracy, the people who doesn't think that men and women should make themselves life presidents because we know and become absolute dictators. For we know that absolute or power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. September 11 has been exploited by people in Africa, dictators, wicked people who are life presidents, who are bloodsuckers, who actually live on the blood of their people, who are sorcerers in secret societies. Some of them right here in America have exploited September 11. In Africa, it is Boko Haram. Among the Arabs and Iraq and all of those places, Syria, all of those hot spots in the world, terrorists have taken over. And we know that the American-born nationals and citizens who actually were part of Al-Qaeda and worked towards the destruction of their country. And so, terrorism is not the work of one nation and its nationals. Yes, we know that they are state-sponsored terrorist leaders. Some in Africa, some in the Americas, some in Europe, in Asia. But I want to make it clear that every national is capable of terrorism, as the history of terror has shown us. And many of the times, it is founded on the need to grab power, political power, socioeconomic power. Some of it is economic power. Like when we've had riots and Matthias, we know we know the Black Wall Street in Tulsa. That was a form of terrorism, when it was to make sure that a certain race of people don't have political and economic power by going there to burn down whole blocks of successful estates and businesses that were put together. There are many who think that Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing were terroristic act to frighten the Japanese and all those people. So the world is not short of terrorism. And terrorism will not end until the world comes to an end. But terrorism can be controlled. Terrorists can be stopped in their activism and machinations. And as we say, there are many who have gone under, made secret deals with the United States and said, oh, we are fighting Boko Haram in Africa and all of that, and they have been given all types of resources which they have used to against their own people and use terrorism or state-sponsored terrorism to remain in power for 40 years, for 60 years, and they continue to do so if they don't die. They are in South America, they are in Africa, they are in Asia, they are in other places, and even the storming of the US Capitol by Trump's followers, or who we call the Trump terrorists, are acts of terrorism to create fear, to kill the Vice President of the United States, the Speaker of the House. That is despicable. That it is not the Muslims who desire to do that. It's white blood, as they say, blue eyes, who long for power that they didn't get to the ballot box. And they are ready to go down to Washington again and march. That is why the periphery of the Congress is about to be sealed up. Yes. homegrown terrorism is what the FBI and the Secret Service are very concerned about inside the USA presently. So, to you, who was affected, many of you were not born almost 19 or 20 years ago. It was a dark day in the world. It was a dark happening in the world. But that darkness brought out two things, good and bad, out of man. There are those who ask themselves, was so much money that was spent in the Afghanistan war over 20 years, was it worth it? Was going after Al-Qaeda meant taking over the nation of Afghanistan and doing as you want and putting your own form of government and type of people that were not along the line of the historical evolution of the Afghanistan country? Was it worth it? There are many who said the Pope and the United Nations said no to the Iraq war. Was it worth going to take Saddam Hussein and all the expenses and everything that was done? Was Saddam Hussein not be checked through another form, a method? Yes, some mistakes were done. It has affected the image of America around the world. It affected the cooperation of other nations as fighting terrorism is concerned. But just like fighting SARS-CoV-2, if we are not safe in other parts of the world, if we cannot share science, medical and health commodities, if we cannot share intelligence, even terrorism intelligence, it may not be the use of planes to kill 3,000. Remember that SARS-CoV-2 has killed almost 1 million people in the US. And bioterrorism may end up to be the worst if the world doesn't come together, if the good people of the world doesn't speak to one another, if the good people in the United States don't begin to listen and speak to one another, if the good people of the United States refuse to realize that Russia and co are taking advantage of the divisions inside here, like they complain and blame America for taking advantage of political divisions inside Russia, whether that is true or not, that is one of the ways that they destroy great nations. It is time for America to stop these divisions on the basis of who is political right or politically wrong. It is time for Americans to come together. It is time for the world to come together. It is time for the people to be able to be smart and intelligent enough to see how dictators in Africa and South America and other nations of the world are exploiting this so-called fight against global terrorism against their own people. Because it's just for them to say this opposition leader is a terrorist. And America, we keep a blind eye, we turn a blind eye, and they will kill and do away with the opposition. They have walked, they have threatened, they have used terror to make sure that the best and the bravest in their countries run away, so that they and their little minions and rats can call themselves ministers of the devils that they are. But the time has come, like the world came together to say no to Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden. Yes, we are aware of the complaints and social justice or injustices which those who commit terrorism talk about as the basis or motivations of their action. But there is no justification for taking the life of another person when we can use alternate methods. But they are taking the lives of the innocents in Africa, in other parts of the world, and they are using terrorism. And it is time that we look at the negatives in terrorism. And even 9/11 was exploited in the United States negatively by certain parties and people. But Americans seem to be learning their lesson, and we thank you.